Well, welcome to all of you again here, my good old friends and new friends here in Annisquam. And to those who will be listening later in another time and place, welcome. If you missed, as Rick said, the first session, you can find that on my website, douglasveenhof.com, for free download. I think it's downloadable, but certainly viewable for free on my website. And as I mentioned so this is the second of a series of 6 sessions this summer on the 6 Bardos of Padmasambhava. And as I mentioned with the introduction to the first Bardo, the Bardo of Living, last week, that I would, in this second session, be mixing the order up. So normally there are 3 Bardos when the Bardos are presented. It's common to present the Bardos in a number of settings and a number of texts as 3 Bardos, just the Bardo of Dying and then the Bardo of Dharmata and the Bardo of Becoming. So what happens with death and after death. But Padmasambhava's original text actually included 6 Bardos, and 3 of those Bardos are Bardos of living, things that we can do during this life to prepare for the subsequent Bardos 4, 5, and 6, dying, the Bardo of Dharmata or ultimate reality, and then the Bardo of becoming, which is really the descent back, the glide path back into rebirth. And so what I would like to do tonight is mix up the order of the presentation. So rather than go to the second and third Bardos right away, what I'm going to do is tonight present the 4th Bardo, which is the Bardo of Dying. And this is because, for me, when I was studying this, it really occurred to me that when you really understand what is coming with death and the steps immediately and the stages immediately after that, before the Bardo of Dharmata, that you really have a keen interest, motivation, and knowledge about what to do with this life to prepare for what comes next. And if we went directly into practicing shamatha and vipassana without understanding the context really for why these are so important for taking advantage of what comes later, I think we would be missing some of the point anyway. So on to dying. We all know that a common experience with approaching death and even sometimes contemplating death is fear, anxiety, uncertainty, dis-ease. And why is that, do you think? So why is it not regarded as just an ordinary, another major event of nature? Something as joyful as birth, for instance. Well, perhaps the reason for the fear that accompanies death commonly, anyway, is that people really who are fearful, don't really understand who they are in this life, right now. And normally, we are encouraged in our contemporary culture, certainly by advertisers, to identify with very shallow, consumable, purchasable objects. So the house, the car, the family, so all of these things that we acquire and can collect. And these then become what we pin our identity on. And so when all of these things inevitably are going to be swept away at death, what is it that we're going to be left with then? And if we don't know what we are besides all of those things, it doesn't mean, I'm not saying that having a nice car and a nice house and a lovely family and all of that is something that you avoid in order to be spiritual. Because you can avoid all of those things, and that can become your identity just as well. And so what I am saying, though, is that there is a deeper identity underneath all of those things that are going to be lost at death. And we do have an opportunity, if we practice and have a path for coming face to face with who we are and understanding and perceiving directly the nature of the mind in its most deepest essence. And so that is what, when we leave all of these things behind that we have spent our life accumulating, what we are going to be left with is mind. And so during the Bardo of this life, when we are on a spiritual path, we, especially in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, spend a lot of time and perhaps a lot of effort trying to come face to face with the nature of the mind directly. What we are in our deepest essence, called pristine awareness or Rigpa, or developing shamatha and resting in the non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss of substrate consciousness. So those are terms that you might not understand right now, but I think you'll be able to just get a feeling for them in the context of what we're talking about as we go along. And so it's interesting that during this life we can spend so much time and passion and effort trying to develop those spiritual insights, but at death there is a natural progression that happens during this Bardo of death that reveals that nature of mind directly without any effort whatsoever, just as part of the natural process. And if we are prepared with our practice during this life to recognize and take advantage of the opportunity that presents itself naturally at the conclusion of the Bardo of Dying, then we have an opportunity to achieve the highest potential of this human life as it is understood in the Buddhist tradition. The painful Bardo of death, as it's called, begins at the time that we get the diagnosis, or perhaps when we see the other car coming head-on in our lane. So it's either the accident or the terminal illness or just the simple exhaustion of old age. But it's when we really are beginning to decline, I guess you could say, or to meet the circumstances of an accident that lead to the dissolution that occurs at death, with the death of our body. And the experience that occurs then for all of us occurs in a predictable and knowable way to all people, but the way that we experience it is very individual. And it's said in Dzogchen and often in other traditions, Buddhist traditions as well, that there are three different types of practitioners, or three different levels of capacity: those of greatest capacity, those of middling or mediocre or medium capacity, and those of lesser capacity. So not real idiots, but just relative to the greater capacity, it definitely is lesser. So the people who are said to be of greatest capacity are a very select group. Those are, and very limited group. And they are really almost the stuff of legends. So this is Padmasambhava and other great disciples in the lineage. These are people who really achieve rainbow bodies, who have become so familiar and know the true nature of mind and rest in it with just constancy, so that when they die, they don't actually die. So that they actually leave the body without going through the death process or entering this Bardo of death. So the rainbow body occurs in a number of different categories or stages or qualities. And the greatest of these is called the Great Transference Rainbow Body, where a a master is really enlightened before death. And so his body just disappears. You could be looking at him and he just vanishes. His body becomes decorporeal, I guess you could say. So this is a very small group of people that achieves this great transference rainbow body, one of whom was Padmasambhava, who was giving his last testament to the people of Tibet and then just disappeared on a sunbeam, it's said. But that's the way that great transference rainbow body happens. And then the three other lesser rainbow bodies are the body. In one, the body would dissolve basically over a period of days, and just the hair and nails will be left. So these are well documented. There are some well documented cases of that in Tibet. And then a much more common form of rainbow body is one in which over the course of a number of days after death, while the consciousness is still resting in something called tukdam that we'll talk about later, that the body just shrinks down to the size of a young person and sometimes even an infant, but maintains all of its features of being a grown person, but just continues to shrink. And these are very well documented. And it isn't just something from legend of the past. In the particular lineage that I've been studying with Lama Alan Wallace, which is the Dujam Tursar, founded by Dujam Lingpa, who is really a modern master, not really contemporary, but he died in 1904. So, he was of the 20th century at the end. And 13 of his disciples achieved rainbow body actually during his lifetime. And he left a prophecy that actually 100 of disciples in the lineage, could be centuries later, but practicing within his lineage, 100 of his disciples would achieve rainbow body. And also he was very emphatic in stressing that these teachings of his were going to be very important for people of the West. And so it's curious just to think, when we have the karma to hear these teachings of Dujam Lingpa and Dzogchen and the Bardos, who we must have been in a previous life perhaps, just to be able to contact these teachings now. So those are the great practitioners. Then the middling practitioners actually don't go through the Bardo of death and don't really die in the normal way either, because they have become so familiar with the nature of mind through their Mahamudra or Dzogchen practice or Madhyamaka practice, that they don't really die. They just achieve enlightenment actually at death. So they leave their body behind, like a lot of great masters have, but they become enlightened before death and during the actual process of the dissolutions, and don't really go through the entire death process. That leaves if we're not any of those two categories, that leaves the lesser capacity for all of the rest of us. And that is, we go through a normal death and individual death, really, but normal for a lesser person. And we will go through the Bardo of Dying. And so all of Padmasambhava's instructions for what comes during this Bardo are for us. And it's emphasized in these teachings that at the moment of death, there are two things that are of paramount importance. And that is, of course, the karma that you have accumulated through the actions of your body, speech, and mind during this lifetime. All of those things are going to be very apparent and important during the death process itself, and through especially the Bardos of becoming. And the second thing, so it's your karma is the first thing that's of great importance. And then the second thing is the last thought or emotion or sensation, but the last thing that is on your mind or in your mind at the moment of death. So this is really important for people who are caretakers of people who are dying, to recognize that the last moments have such power to transform the entire experience of death and the outcome that can be expected through this death process. And it is also very important for us, when we are dying ourselves, to remember that those last thoughts are crucial for everything that is going to come later. And this is why Atisha, who was a great master of India, who went to Tibet and taught the Lamrim and is one of the greatest figures of Tibetan Buddhism, Atisha gave advice with 5 different points, or 3 different points really with a few subpoints. For the moments, what to fill your mind with in this last moment before death. So the first actually refers to your physical position as you are dying. And so it's said in Tibetan Buddhism that we should try to imitate the position of the Buddha in his parinirvana. So there are a lot of statues of the Buddha's parinirvana are very common, especially in Southeast Asia. And it is the Buddha lying on his right side with the right hand under his cheek, facing, with the head facing the north. And so on his right side, he'd be facing the west. You know, and all of these things have spiritual symbolism. And then the left hand on the hip. So this is the sleeping lion posture, but it's not nearly as crucial as the thoughts then that you cultivate next. So the second point of Atisha's final advice is to practice relative bodhicitta. So this is the bodhicitta that most of us are familiar with, where you're really developing compassion and the wish to become enlightened in order to benefit all other beings. But it's really compassion in action. And here with this practice of bodhicitta, while you are preparing to take your last breath, you can join or you link the practice of Tonglen with the breath. So Tonglen is a practice of giving and taking. You are giving love and happiness, and you are taking suffering from somebody who you have as a target, or somebody who comes to mind, or to a class of people, or to all of the people of Gaza, or to whoever it is that you wish to take the suffering from. So on the in-breath, as you breathe in, you take all of the suffering of someone that you're visualizing or a group of people. And then on the exhalation, you are exhaling, and I guess it's important that this suffering, as you're taking this suffering, doesn't become accumulated in you as suffering that just begins to overwhelm you. But the suffering that you take in actually is destroyed then in this luminous orb of light at your heart. And so you're taking the suffering in, and then it is just exploded when it comes through your nose and then down to your own heart and turns into light. So you're actually decreasing suffering rather than just accumulating and putting in your bank of suffering. And then you are exhaling, sending love and the wish for happiness to these people that you have just taken the suffering from. So you do this, and you can make the practice of this in your life also, just as you're walking down the street, and just on every in and out breath, bring in suffering and send out love and happiness. So that's the second point. This is what you're trying to fill your mind with as you are dying and nearing the very end. So relative bodhicitta, and then there is the ultimate bodhicitta, which is really knowing directly the nature of mind. And so what you, here Atisha actually says, consider, quote, all of samsara and nirvana consists of delusive appearances. The actual nature of the mind has never been other than the Dharmakaya, so there is nothing in me that can die. So if you, I mentioned earlier all of these superficial things that you can identify yourself with. If you are really identifying with the Dharmakaya as me, and if that term is unfamiliar to you at the moment, I think by the end of this class you'll have a very good idea of what Dharmakaya is. So because you are identifying with Dharmakaya, this ultimate nature, which is a non-dual union of luminosity and emptiness, you recognize that there is nothing actually that can die. If this is you, if you are Dharmakaya, then all that can happen is that this is going to be somehow transformed. But it certainly is not going to end or terminate. And then you can alternate the practices of relative and ultimate bodhicitta as you die. And this is really a very powerful way to approach the final few thoughts. And if you can't do that, then identify the actual nature of your own mind as the Dharmakaya. Perceive the character of samsara and nirvana as neither to be accepted nor rejected. So this is the great advice to see samsara and nirvana as the same. So basically suffering and ultimate reality, when in their ultimate nature, they are no different from each other. And to recognize that, of course, you have to recognize the emptiness of all phenomena. And so to fill your mind with that then is really to already place your mind in where you are hoping to end up at the end of the whole death process anyway. So if you can fill your mind with those thoughts as you are dying, you have a much better chance of an outcome that will lead you to the greatest potential of this Bardo of Dying. And then Atisha concludes, there is no more wondrous counsel on dying than this. So if you are sitting with someone who is dying and they are receptive, and this wouldn't seem like intrusive, or it wouldn't seem like preaching, or it wouldn't seem like you're lecturing them on how to die, then and they have asked you especially to help them in the death process, then as Atisha says, there is no more wondrous counsel on dying than this. So essentially filling your mind with bodhicitta. And another advice that you hear all the time in the texts on death is that very important at the very end, the one thing is to eliminate attachment. And so this attachment is to all of your possessions, which naturally you are going to leave behind, to all of the worldly thoughts that have motivated us to accumulate all of the stuff that is going to be given away and fought over by our heirs, and even the attachment to this life itself, and certainly to our identity. So you give up attachment to all of these things, and it's very important that the atmosphere in the room where we are dying be conducive to giving up attachment as well. So it is important to, first of all, it said to give away all of your things before you die. So this would be really wonderful to actually have the will read probably before you actually expire, and so that you could, and as a benefit to yourself, so that all of the fighting can happen out of your earshot, because unfortunately if the fighting happens after you die, you have a clairvoyance that is going to tune in to all of the fighting that's going on and squabbling in the family. So it said, give away all of your possessions and also give up attachment to all of your loved ones, your friends and relatives. And this doesn't mean to give up your love for them, but your attachment to them. Because your attachment to them is going to be something that anchors and causes sadness that you are leaving them, and grief on your own part at leaving them, and leaving the world that you have cultivated for so long and with such a great fervor to make a perfect life for yourself. So you have to give up your attachment to this life that you have made for yourself and spent your life cultivating. And just also one more great piece of advice on, at this stage, how to be with somebody who is dying comes from Sogyal Rinpoche in one of the greatest texts, contemporary texts, for how to die, and the whole Tibetan approach to understanding these bardos. This is Sogyal Rinpoche's The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And there is a tremendous amount of technical information in this book about the bardos, about death, in both the scientific ways and of understanding, and also in the traditional Tibetan ways. But it all comes down to this, he says, when you are counseling someone on how to die in their very last moments. And this is something also that we can also do for ourselves as we are dying. And it is what he calls the essential poa. Poa is a Tibetan term that means transference. And this is transferring your mind to a pure land, or out of the body to very favorable circumstances for rebirth. And so this is the way that he presents this is very non-sectarian. So you don't have to be a Tibetan Buddhist to do this. I think it'd be a very powerful practice for any spiritual person. And I think it lends itself to counseling Christians who are dying also. And Jews and Muslims all would really, I think, be able to practice this with great benefit. And so his advice is that so if you are reading this to someone, this is the voice that he's using in these instructions. In the sky in front of you, invoke the embodiment of whatever truth you believe in the form of radiant light. Choose whichever divine being or saint you feel close to. So there, it's just wide open. Jesus, Mary, any, could be God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit. It's any of the Buddhist pantheon and deities, or whatever it is, and you don't even have to imagine this as a deity also. So I think an atheist could also do this by just imagining, as he says, the embodiment of truth in the form of radiant light. And then focus your mind, heart, and soul on the presence you have invoked and pray. Through your blessing, grace, and guidance, through the power of the light that streams from you, may all my negative karma, destructive emotions, obscurations, and blockages be purified and removed. May I know myself forgiven for all of the harm I have done and thought. May I accomplish this profound practice of POA and die a good and peaceful death. And although the triumph of my life, and through the triumph of my life, thank you. And through the triumph of my death, may I be able to benefit all other beings, living or dead. And then now imagine that the presence of light you have invoked is so moved by your sincere and heartfelt prayer that he or she responds with a loving smile and sends out love and compassion in a stream of rays of light from his or her heart. As these touch and penetrate you, they cleanse and purify all your negative karma, destructive emotions and obscurations, which are the causes of suffering. You see and feel that you are totally immersed in light. You are now completely purified and completely healed by the light streaming from the presence. Consider that your very body, itself created by karma, now dissolves completely into light. The body of light you are now soars up into the sky and merges inseparably with the blissful presence of light. Remain in that state of oneness with the presence for as long as possible. So that is a really powerful way of filling your mind with the transcendent thoughts that can lead you then to very powerful experience of what is to come later in the Bardo. And I think it's also very important to recognize that as a caregiver at the deathbed, that the state of your own mind is going to be very powerful in determining the state of the mind of the person who is dying. And so if you can yourself, and especially if you have some experience of resting in the nature of mind yourself, you will create an atmosphere really that the person, because they are becoming, as you will see when we describe what happens through the stages of death, becomes very, very sensitive. And the power, there is extraordinary power in the death process itself. And so the atmosphere that you create just with your own state of mind can be very beneficial to the person who is dying. The Bardo of Dying actually details the stages of dissolution of the the elements of the coarse body, as well as the dissolution of the subtle body. So this is what happens during the death process in the Bardo of Dying, or according to the Bardo of Dying. It is the dissolution of the elements of the body and then the subtle consciousness. And that then what happens after the end of that is that we reach this state of pure mind Dharmakaya. And we are hoping that our whole progression through this dissolution process of the body and mind leads us to recognize that experience when it actually occurs. According to the traditional teachings, our bodies, our coarse bodies, are composed of 5 elements, which are earth, fire, water, air, and space. And Lama Allen points out that these are, of course, not the elements of the periodic table. And we shouldn't think that somehow this is just mystical mumbo-jumbo or mythology that has no relevance to us. Because this is, these are the physical elements that we can access through our own first-person investigation. So the periodic table is a purely conceptual notion for all of us, but these elements of the body, the earth, fire, water, air, and space, are things that we can actually have experience of when we investigate them with our especially very focused and clear attention. So in the course perspective of the dissolution of the body, the dissolution occurs in 4 stages. Earth dissolves into water, water dissolves into fire, fire dissolves into wind, and then wind dissolves into consciousness. And each of these elements, as they dissolve, we first experience an increase and then a decrease or a loss of its particular qualities, the particular qualities of each of those elements, of the earth, water, fire, air, and space. And the process of this dissolution is accompanied by signs of death which manifest on the outer, inner, and secret levels. The outer signs are related to the experience of the body as the elements are dissolving. And so these are going to be the outer elements, or the outer signs, I should say, are going to be observable to physicians, caretakers, hospice workers, relatives. These are going to be manifest for the person experiencing them and for all of us who are in the presence of this person also. The inner signs are the experience of mind or cognitive functioning, and these are also going to be observable by all of us who are close to this person, and obviously to the person themselves. And the secret signs are all the varying and changing and progressively evolving experience of emptiness and luminosity. And so the outer and inner signs are indications of the diminishing connection between the mind and the physical body. And the secret signs, on the other hand, are an indication of the approach of the experience of ultimate nature. So they're going in opposite directions. As the elements dissolve, the luminosity is becoming greater and greater as the physical elements and the connection between mind and body become less and less. The first phase is that earth dissolves into water. And this occurs when the chakra at the navel starts to dissolve. And this is these chakra systems are part of the notion of the subtle body in yoga philosophy and Vajrayana Buddhism. And so there are chakras, winds, and channels. But so there are, for our purpose here, 4 important chakras: one at the navel, one at the heart, one at the throat, and then one at the secret place, which is the genitals. And there's also one at the Brahmanic aperture at the very top of the head, which would be a 5th one. But those first 4 are the ones that are important for the Bardo of Dying. And so as the chakra at the navel dissolves, the earth element begins to dissolve into water. And the outer sign of this is first of all, there's the increase of the sensation, and then there's the loss of the sensation. So the increase is that your body feels very heavy, and it can feel as if you are being crushed, actually, as if there is a great weight also upon you, as if you're being crushed by a mountain, a landslide that is crumbling and falling apart. And there can be intense cracking sounds as if a mountain is exploding and coming apart. And then as the dissolution of the earth into water continues, you may begin to feel that your body is dissolving or becoming less solid. So it begins with that increase of the sensation and then the diminishment of it. And at the same time, your physical strength, resilience, and sense of balance show signs of diminishing. And here also, during this dissolution, your eye consciousness and sight are vanishing. That's the outer level, or the outer sign. And the inner sign, at the cognitive level, your mind feels heavy and listless. Your perception dims, and appearances become unclear or murky, as if there were not enough light in the room to make out appearances clearly. And the secret sign that now arises is connected to the experience of emptiness. As the more coarse level appearances begin to recede, you perceive a mirage. This is something that we see a lot in the desert, the high desert where I live, and where I used to live also in Arizona. And of course and you see these on roads commonly also, right? So it's just the ripples of heat that create the illusion of water and lakes. And, there are great legends anyway of Western settlers who have been crossing a desert, see water, a lake out there in the distance and go to it, and it's ever receding, they never reach it. So this is the classic image, the secret image, or the secret sign that only you are, as the dying person, are aware of. It's this mirage. And these secret signs, it's very important to familiarize yourself with these and be aware of them and recognize them when they happen, because they can be very fleeting, depending on your development of your meditation progress. But for most people, they're very fleeting. And so if you recognize, for instance, the first of these images, the mirage, it can just help you to recognize that the dissolution process is underway and to prepare yourself to recognize the subsequent inner or secret appearances as well. And the second dissolution that occurs is the dissolution of water into fire. And this occurs when the heart chakra begins to dissolve. The outer sign that manifests is the sensation of being inundated by water. And subsequently, your body begins to dry out. So first you're flooded and then you're parched. For example, your mouth and nose and tongue may feel dry and uncomfortable as your body loses fluids as well. And at this time, you may have leakage and intense thirst. The inner sign is that your body becomes increasingly unclear. And this is, of course, because the heart chakra has a very strong relationship to the mind in these traditions. The mind is thought not to be centered in the brain, but in the heart. And so your consciousness at this point becomes vague and foggy as the heart chakra dissolves. And at the same time, your mind may become restless and agitated. And your emotions may be easily provoked, and you might become upset or angry very readily. All of the stages of death, or at these stages of death, the experiences of our emotions become very strong. And so I think we all have witnessed that, people who are inexplicably emotionally aroused, angry, or hostile sometimes as they are leaving us. And at this stage here, where we are at the second dissolution, where water is dissolving into fire. Here, the secret sign that emerges is the appearance like clouds, or probably more appropriately for this area here, fog. And the sounds of great waves crashing resound even though the hearing consciousness is dissolving. So by preparing yourself, knowing these signs, obviously, and recognizing them when these are being experienced by you or by a caregiver who is requested to guide the person through their death, as you recognize the outer signs or the cognitive signs, then you can cue the person who is going through the dissolution to be ready to recognize the secret appearances, the mirage, the fog, etc., as they are appearing. The third dissolution is the dissolution of fire into wind. And this occurs when the throat chakra dissolves. The outer sign is that you first experience an increase of warmth in your body, followed by a loss of bodily heat. And the heat escapes through the breath and through perspiration and through vapors through your pores. And it starts in the extremities, in the fingers and toes, become cold, and then moves progressively towards the heart, which would be the last thing to become cold. And along the way, the limbs become stiff and cold. The inner sign is that the clarity of mind fluctuates as it alternates between being in periods of clarity and then unclear and confused. It is though we sometimes wake up and sometimes fall back into a state of no perception. And at this point, it becomes very obvious to ourselves as we are dying and to those around us that we are losing touch with conscious experience. You can no longer speak at this stage, and it's hard to recognize people. And also, as one of the inner signs, you hear a resounding, immense firestorm. And the secret sign is that you need to be ready for and to be aware of when you see it, is the appearance of what is often described as campfire sparks when they fly up into the air out of a campfire, or fireflies. And this is because in the previous two dissolutions, these were all related to an increasing experience and development of clarity of emptiness. And now we are beginning to experience with the second two dissolutions increasing luminosity. So this emptiness and luminosity are the two qualities of the Dharmakaya that we're becoming closer and closer to through the dissolution. And these flashes of luminosity manifest for just a moment and pulse just on and off like fireflies. And the fourth and final dissolution of the body then, of the coarse elements, occurs when the secret chakra at the genitals dissolves and the wind element dissolves into consciousness. Again, the wind element, the sensations of the wind element intensify and then it diminishes. The outer sign here is that the breath becomes markedly shorter. Breathing becomes more difficult, and then eventually the exhalation becomes longer than the inhalation and is sometimes accompanied by a rattling sound. And at this time, the eyes start to roll upward, and each time this happens, the period that the eyes are rolled up becomes longer and longer. Eventually, the breathing stops altogether, and then from this perspective of the coarse dissolution process, this would be the moment of clinical death, where all the EEG is flatlined, and breath and the heart rate cease. But in this system, that is not the actual death. And this is called the cessation of outer respiration. But the cessation of inner respiration actually occurs later, when the subtle consciousness dissolves. So that's those. We talked about the outer sign. The inner sign is that our minds become extremely confused and unstable, and hallucinations appear. And there are sounds like a resounding roar of a dragon. And according to these teachings, the hallucinations we experience will all be determined by our karma. And so at this point, depending on your karma, these could be either terrifying appearances, or they could be appearances of very spiritual importance to you. So if you're a deity yoga or Vajrayana practitioner practicing deity yoga, for instance, the hallucination of your yidam, your deity, could appear to you and give you instructions for proceeding in the Bardo, etc. So these can be very powerful, supportive appearances, or they can be fearful and terrifying appearances. The secret sign is said to be, with this dissolution, a brightly shining torch or lamp. And some traditions also say like a butter lamp with an unflickering flame. So it's perfectly serene and stable. And this arising of this vision of the torch or the lamp portends the actual ground of luminosity that will be arising later. But this is not the ground of luminosity, it's just kind of a preview of it. And so if you are, these can occur, this whole dissolution process can take a long time or it can take a short time, very brief, just depending on, for one, the circumstances of your death, and especially if it's a accidental death that in which you die very quickly, or if you have a long, more tranquil or drawn out death. It could be that you go in and out of these in knowable sequences. So what happens then after this clinical death, the dissolution of the physical elements of the body, is that the subtle dissolution of the consciousness into space occurs. And your consciousness is going to die in 3 stages as it dissolves into space. And it's important to recognize that in these teachings, there is a distinction made between consciousness and wisdom. And consciousness has a negative connotation to it, the term in these teachings, because it always refers to a duality of consciousness. We are conscious of something other, something outside of us, something other than the consciousness itself. And then wisdom refers to the true nature of the mind, which occurs after consciousness, which we will discover effortlessly after consciousness dissolves. So this is the process in this dissolution of the subtle consciousness, so consciousness is dissolving, and so we are losing the potential for all of our conceptual thought and for mental afflictions as well, and for the entire process of duality is dissolving as we go through these three dissolutions of subtle consciousness. And during the inner dissolution of consciousness, there are no longer any outer signs because you are clinically dead and you're no longer responding to the environment. The inner dissolution, it's said in the text, typically takes about 20 minutes, or the time it takes to eat a meal. So it's a fairly brief experience, this dissolution of what are called the 80 innate thoughts. And this phase of the Bardo marks the subtle dissolution and disappearance of all of your conceptual and afflictive mind. So this is this stage of the Bardo, of the dissolution, is really an ultimate purification of your mind. Because your consciousness that is responsible for seeing the world dualistically is dissolving into space in 3 stages. It's said that ideally you should leave the body for 3.5 days without moving it after death. Because as you go through this dissolution, there is a potential for, depending on the level of your practice, whether you are a strong lesser practitioner, meaning that you have developed some stability and clarity with your shamatha practice, that it could take several days actually to get through this whole process, or it also could just flash by. And the dissolution of the subtle consciousness then is going to occur in 3 different stages, which are called appearance, increase, and attainment. The first of these is the white appearance, and this occurs with the descent of the white element obtained from your father from the crown chakra. So it's you, at conception, it's said in this system, and we'll get into this in much greater detail in the Bardo of Becoming, the last session of this series, that the joining, when you enter the womb of your new mother, that there is the red and the white element that are joined, that become, are contributed by the mother and the father. The white element rises to the crown of the head, and then the red element is at the navel. And so the first of these appearances, which is white appearance, occurs when the white element descends from your crown and is moving towards the heart. And this term appearance refers to a state of perception in our ordinary life while we're alive. And that is the first appearance of something through the 5 senses. And this first engagement with an appearance is non-conceptual. It's bare attention or bare awareness. And so it's okay. It hasn't been conceptually elaborated yet. And it's called the white appearance then because of the inner sign is that the sky is filled, it's as if a pure sky is filled with moonlight and everything appears white in this kind of translucent moonish color. And the secret sign that occurs during this dissolution is the 33 innate thought appearance, or the 33 innate thoughts really, resulting from anger cease. And anger dissolves into the experience of clarity. So this is a powerful purification at this point of death, in that our capacity for mental afflictions, for becoming angry, are dissolving in this subtle dissolution. And so at this stage, there are said to be, in Buddhism, three principal mental afflictions: anger, and this whole family of hostility, aversion, aggression. And so that's one. The second is craving and attachment and grasping to things either that we don't have and imagine would give us happiness, or things that we do have and we don't want to lose. And then the third mental affliction is ignorance, which is necessary. Ignorance and seeing the world dualistically is necessary for the existence of craving and attachment, or hostility and anger, because you believe that these things truly exist outside of you, and so you react to them with hostility or attachment. So with the white appearance, then the mental capacity for anger and the 33 innate thoughts associated with anger have disappeared. And the sign is that white appearance of moonlight. The second experience is called red increase. And this occurs with the ascent of the red element obtained from your mother. So, and it is moving towards the heart as well. And these then in the next phase are going to merge at the heart. And increase refers to this moment in our perceptions of this, in this daily life, when we conceptually elaborate this initial bare appearance that we see, and then we give it a name and know that it is a teacup. We attribute functions to it and qualities to it, and know where it came from. It's made in China. We know how much it cost. All of these conceptual elaborations occur then with increase. And in this stage then with red increase, the inner sign is the appearance of a red vision like the rising sun just before dawn, when the sky, especially red sky at night, sailor's delight, red sky at dawn, sailor take warn. So one of those take warn signs. And the inner sign that is occurring then are that the 40 innate thoughts resulting from craving and attachment are dissolving and cease. And this, with this dissolution, attachment dissolves into the experience of bliss. So if we could really be cognizant and lucid through this whole experience, what we recognize that this is a real purification that is occurring of the mind that has caused all of our problems during the life that we have just left. And the next of the three in the subtle dissolution is called the black near attainment. And here, the white and red bindus from the mother and father meet at the heart and are cupped, or they cup actually what is called the indestructible bindu at the heart. So this is the very subtle mind at the heart, which is pristine awareness, call it. And so when this cupping occurs with the red and the white element, cupping the indestructible bindu, consciousness is squeezed out of our experience. So all consciousness, remember, with a negative connotation of duality. We have lost our capacity for duality at this point, to perceive everything dualistically. And at this point then, cognitive capability of the mind ceases, and there is no possibility for thought or emotion or mental affliction to arise. And at the black near attainment, it's called the inner sign. So the inner sign is a blackout. You faint into unconsciousness. And the secret sign is that the 7 innate thoughts resulting from ignorance cease. And ignorance dissolves into the experience of non-conceptuality. So you see that then with these what are called 80 innate thoughts that are really kind of manifestations of the 3 poisons or 3 mental afflictions, we have lost our capacity to experience these. And so our mind now is really ready for something else, to experience ultimate reality. And for most people, when they fall into the black near attainment, this is simply going to be an oblivious state. So this would be akin to deep dreamless sleep that occurs for some period up to 2 hours or 2.5 hours, if we're lucky, every night. And during this period, what we are entering is a function or a feature of consciousness called substrate, which is a consciousness that is at these. It's called the all-basis consciousness commonly also. And this is what actually transfers from life to life. It is the repository of all of our karmic seeds. And during this period, we are typically unaware when we fall into substrate. It is only when we awaken then from substrate and into substrate consciousness that we can begin to experience then luminosity. So the goal of our practice in this life, and we will be getting into this in the 4th session, which will be the Bardo of Dreaming. We will be discussing in that session techniques and approaches to developing lucid dreaming, and for how to actually remain aware during deep dreamless sleep. And this is a very powerful and difficult thing to attain. But if you are able to do this, then it's said that if you can maintain lucidity during deep dreamless sleep, when dreams arise, you will naturally enter that period being lucid as well. So you can go through the entire night being totally lucid and never losing awareness. And when you have the capacity for doing that, then you are going to very likely be able to, when you enter this black near attainment at death, rather than falling unconscious and just blacking out for some period, that you will retain lucidity through the black near attainment and then be ready for the dream when it arises next, which is the big event. And if we are unconscious in the black mirror attainment, then when the big event arrives next, we may not recognize it, and it may just pass unnoticed by us. And so this period of the black mirror attainment, it's said, will last as long as your meditative state of samadhi lasts. So samadhi is this state of single-pointed focus that you can develop with shamatha practice that Rick has been teaching for the last year here. And when you develop this samadhi, then you will have this single-pointed balance of a very stable and clear awareness for some period of time. And the goal of the practice is to continue to develop a longer and longer practice of that. And then eventually, when you truly achieve this state of shamatha, then you will be able to maintain this balance for at least 24 hours. And so if you are able to, so the period of time that you spend in the black mirror attainment, it said, is directly linked to the stability of your mind during this life. And so if your mind is very habitually distracted and unclear and unfocused, then this could also pass by in a flash. And then on the morning of the figurative fourth day, so it's said that you should allow 3.5 days for all of this to unfold by not moving the body, just, as a best case scenario, that this could be a secret practitioner who is actually highly realized, and that they are going to show off at their death exactly their attainments. And then on the morning of the figurative fourth day, space dissolves into the ground luminosity, and the stage of full attainment appears. And in this, all notions of self and other, existence and non-existence, good and bad, are completely dissolved in the expanse of Dharmakaya, and non-conceptual awareness manifests fully. And recognizing this ground luminosity when it appears is called the meeting of mother and child luminosities. The mother luminosity is this ground luminosity which is at the essence of our being, this emptiness hyphen luminosity. And so this is the Dharmakaya. And the child luminosity is our understanding and practice and realization of that state that we have cultivated during this life, that we actually bring through the process of death. And so it is our practice then that is meeting the ground luminosity that is the big event. And so the potential is that if we recognize this mother luminosity as we go through this experience, that we reach enlightenment there and then in that moment. And so you rest then for a period in this ground luminosity, and it's said that you rest there for 5 samadhi days. And so the samadhi day would be the period of time that you have cultivated during this bardo of life, and how long you can remain in samadhi is called one samadhi day. So if you can rest in samadhi for 5 minutes, then you will rest in this state of clear light for 25 minutes. And if you can rest for a full day, then you could rest for 5 days, etc. And of course, 5 times 0 is 0. meaning that it could flash by totally unrecognized if you haven't developed your capacity for samadhi in this life, which is the reason that Rick has been so insistent that this is a very important practice for us to develop in this life, and why he has devoted a year, this past year, to giving you the really extraordinary instructions for how to do that. So all of this can sound like magic and mystery of long ago Tibet. And it can seem that there is a pollution of our modernity that has somehow left us unable to be fully lucid as we are dissolving the physical and coarse elements, and be aware through the black near attainment, and take advantage of the ground luminosity and recognize it when it happens. So wouldn't it be wonderful if there were actually an account in our own language from somebody of our time who describes this as a first-person experience, something that they went through, and returned to tell us about it? That would be something completely different than the kind of dry recitation of text that I have just given you, to actually hear about somebody's experience. And wouldn't it be wonderful if actually we could hear of that experience in a voice that could really reveal the experience itself? And wouldn't it be wonderful if Lindsay Crouse would read that for us? Thank you, Lindsay, for helping us through this with this recitation. And let's just regard this as our guided meditation for the evening.
In Love with the World, A Monk's Journey Through the Bardos of Living and Dying by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche with Helen Tworkov. My mouth became very dry. I rolled my tongue around but had no saliva. The water element was leaving my body. My body felt like it was opening up and falling away, like the bundles of long grass that are tied together at the bottom. When the tie is cut, every piece falls away from the center. My body was falling apart, dispersing, loosening, melting, and then I began floating on water. But the glue of my conceptual mind had not yet come undone. With my capacity for commentary intact, I intentionally reviewed the Bardo map. I wanted to make sure I was getting this right. That the dissolution of the elements had begun, and that the process would spontaneously dissolve layers of conditioning, leaving the gap through which luminous emptiness would appear with greater clarity than ever before. I had heard about this luminous emptiness that accompanies the moment of death all my life, the best chance for enlightenment. My experiences affirmed that the dissolution of my consciousness freed the mind, and I trusted that sleep and dreams reflected echoes of physically dying. I became excited, eager, and couldn't wait for the next steps to unfold. My extremities turned cold. It was very hot outside, so I knew that this was caused by losing body heat. The fire element was leaving. As my body became colder, I could not make out distinct forms and saw only reddish flashes before my eyes. The texts say that at this point, the heart area remains warm. I wanted to check to make sure I was on track. I had trouble lifting my hand and used one to help push the other toward my chest. Yes, hands almost too frozen to move, but the heart is warm. I'm on my way. My awareness was becoming clearer and clearer. The conceptual mind was present but beginning to fade, and did not intrude with any force. With the conceptual mind diminishing within the infinite universe of awareness, I moved closer to the utter joy that infuses the awakened moment. My body, which had been so sick and knew intense pain, was transferring the release of its dissipating energy to my mind, as if saying, "Go, go, go." With newfound confidence, recognition of awareness continued. Even as my body weakened, I felt more vigorous. I had no fear. All the confusion and fear had disappeared with the decision to remain here and to protect myself with acceptance. The dissolution of air did not have the quality of elimination. Instead, it felt more like being filled up. Each inhalation expanded beyond my lungs, transforming matter into air, making the body lighter, more resilient. The internal air seeped out of the lung channels and into my organs and bones. It went into my blood cells and tissue and marrow. Inhalations blew me up like a balloon, pushing up against the inner edges of bone and flesh until my body imploded. Bits of matter flew in all directions, dissolving into infinite emptiness. I could no longer see or hear. The container had cracked. With the dissolution of air into space, my body became completely paralyzed. I could not move. Internal physical movement slowed to bare functioning, but my consciousness remained unchanged. With the conceptual mind dimming down, I recalled the dissolution of the body from Bardo texts. Up until then, I had felt my heart and my lungs. Now I could no longer detect my heartbeat or feel movement in my abdomen. Yet my mind had become blissful and continued to expand to fill the entire universe. I took note of what was happening. At this point, the lucid mind of meditation was still a state that I inhabited. I was cognizant of the calm, of the awareness of the paralysis, of the dissolution of the elements. Then even the subtlest form of conditioned mind began to fade. As the sensory system and elements dissolved, I had only awareness itself to rest in. With the disappearance of the body structure that stores both gross and subtle perceptions, the mind expanded into realms of boundless spaciousness that it had never known before. The cup that is called child luminosity had shattered. With the conceptual mind draining away, the uncovered original mind manifested with increasing vividness. Yet at one point, with the pull of the sensory systems and elements withdrawing, I almost lost consciousness. I almost blacked out, and then saw red and white flashes, similar to ones that often appear at the last moments of falling asleep. Suddenly, boom, awareness and emptiness became one indivisible, just as it always is. But the recognition had never been this complete before. The last shred of cohesion slipped away. The entire universe opened up and became totally unified with consciousness. No conceptual mind. I was no longer within the universe. The universe was within me. No me separate from the universe. No direction. No within or without. No perception or non-perception. No self or non-self. No living, no dying. The internal movements of the organs and senses slowed way down. No minimal functioning. I still understood what was going on, but not through commentary or voice or image. That type of cognition no longer presented itself. The clarity and luminosity of awareness, beyond concepts, beyond fixed mind, became the sole vehicle of knowing. I was no longer bonded to any sense of a distinct body or mind. No separation existed between me, my mind, my skin, my body, and the entire rest of the world. No phenomenon existed separate from me. Experiences happened, but no longer to a separate me. Perceptions occurred, but with no reference back to anyone. No references at all. No memory. Perceptions, but no perceiver. The me that I had recently been, sick, healthy, beggar, Buddhist, disappeared like clouds that move through a sunlit sky. The top of my head came off. My hearing and my seeing became just hearing and seeing. At best, words point to something beyond the conceptual mind that the conceptual mind cannot know. This must have happened at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Up until then, I had retained some dualistic understanding of what was happening. For the next 5 or 6 hours, I had no experience of conceptual mind. As a drop of water placed in the ocean becomes indistinct, boundless, unrecognizable, and yet still exists, so my mind merged with space. It was no longer a matter of me seeing trees, as I had become trees. Me and trees were one. Trees were not the object of awareness. They manifested awareness. Stars were not the object of appreciation, but appreciation itself. No separate me loved the world. The world was love, my perfect home, vast and intimate. Every particle was alive with love, fluid, flowing, without barriers. I was an alive particle, no interpretive mind, clarity beyond ideas, vibrant, energetic, all-seeing. My awareness did not go toward anything, yet everything appeared, as an empty mirror both receives and reflects everything around it. A flower appears in the empty mirror of the mind, and the mind accepts its presence without inviting or rejecting. It seemed as if I could see forever, as if I could see through trees, as if I could be trees. I cannot even say I continued to breathe or that my heart continued to beat. There was no individual anything, no dualistic perception, no body, no mind, only consciousness. The cup that had contained empty space had broken. The vase had shattered, extinguishing inside and outside. Through meditation, I had known child luminosity, but never had I known such intense union of child and mother luminosity, emptiness infusing emptiness, the bliss of love and tranquility. What happened next is hardest to relate. I did not decide to come back, yet I came back. This did not happen independent of choice, although I cannot say who directed the change. Maintaining recognition of awareness allowed for this, but did not make it happen. It did not have the influence of a voluntary decision, but felt like a spontaneous response to deep connections in this life. The energetic strength of these networks had not come to an end, suggesting that this was not my time to die. With an acknowledgement that had no language, I recognized that my teaching mission was not complete and that I wished to continue my life's work. As this aspiration became stronger, the infinite spaciousness of awareness slowly withdrew its expanse to settle in more finite form. And this in turn eased the reconnection to my body.
It was published in 2019, and Mingyur Rinpoche was Tibetan royalty, really, the son of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, so one of three sons who all were Tulkus. And so he grew up in a very privileged spiritual home. And in 2011, he decided to really pursue the path of a wandering yogi and follow the path of the Hindu sadhus and just go wandering and beg food and sleep under trees. And his wandering took him to Kushinagar, which is where the Buddha died. And then, having been begging food, he was poisoned with dysentery. And he was dying over the course of about 5 days while he was lying against the wall within sight of the great stupa at Kushinagar. And then this is the experience that he recounted of the death process.
I really want to thank Doug for the great privilege of reading this.
Thank you, Lindsay, because your voice really revealed the meaning of these words.
Thank you.
Glad we had that on tape.
And so in our notes, I didn't have room really to, and probably copyright considerations to print all of that. But it's I think page 209 in the book In Love with the World by Mingyur Rinpoche. And the subtitle is A Monk's Journey Through the Bardos of Living and Dying. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for that. So with our meditation concluded, our session comes to a close. If there are, and I know that we have gone over time again, and so if you need to leave, we totally understand, and you can do that now. And if there are any questions about anything that we've talked about, either for me or Lindsay, I'm happy to stay in for some time and talk about those. Yes, Claudia.
Many of us in our practice have been taught the dissolution meditation.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering, is that a practice that prepares us for what you're describing?
Absolutely. So I can't think of a better practice in preparation, frankly. So I think what you are referring to is Kusum Lamkir in the Vajrayogini Tantra practice, which is one that I have spent years practicing also. And the experience is really profound, going through the dissolution process and the appearances of red, white, and black, and the arising in Dharmakaya. And I think, so for years I did that as a daily practice. And I can't think of a better practice in preparation, really.
I heard you talk about, I heard you speak about all the stages of the Bardo of death. What happens if a person is cognitively impaired, how do they move through those stages?
Well, it is said that going through the Bardos, all of the disabilities that we die with dissolve. And so, because all of the cognitive impairments that would be manifesting in a life would be dissolving with the coarse elements of the body when the brain dissolves. And so, especially, I'm not sure exactly at what stage, but as the brain ceases function, I think all the cognitive incapacities would be dissolving with it. And physical also. So as we will talk about later, when we go through the Bardo, any physical incapacities, our appearance at old age, all of that disappears and we become youthful mental beings again.
How about the effect of say, pain-killing medications that are given to us when we're dying?
Very good question. So I think there is a real trade-off in palliative care to anesthetizing someone until death, essentially, because they're in such great pain that they can't bear it, and a desire to maintain clarity and cognizance and lucidity as we go through this stage. And so, that would be a very unfortunate death, I think, to be in such great pain that it required sedation, really. Because we are trying to maintain our clarity and lucidity as we go through the entire experience. And it just seems intuitively to me that if you are sedated, for instance, that you would probably be more of having a black near attainment experience through the whole experience, being unconscious. So I don't, and so obviously on the other hand, if someone is in such intense pain as they are dying, that is not a real favorable circumstance for maintaining clarity and lucidity also going through this. So I don't know exactly what how the perfect balance would work out, but hopefully at some point near death, maybe pain diminishes also, I don't know. But maybe Anita has some perspective on that.
So do you have any idea how we may advise our loved ones who we expect to be present to manage this kind of thing with our doctors or professional caregivers? Or where we might ask that question?
Yeah, actually, I don't have a very good knowledge of those formalities, but I recommend a book by Andrew Holacek called Preparing to Die, which you find on the additional or more recommended readings in today's class notes. And that actually goes through a lot of these details of how, so for instance, organ donation and the question of, letting the body rest for 3.5 days and how you could probably, and he has recommendations about how, I think, through your will, be able to negotiate that somehow. But also advice from high lamas about whether organ donation is a bodhisattva activity or deed, even if it means that within minutes of clinical death that they would be tearing you apart. And his advice was, or the Lama's advice, from some great Lamas that I esteem greatly, reported by Andrew Holichak, was that the Lamas said that for most people, remember we talked about the relative time going through, could be, if you're a high practitioner, it could take a long time. And if you are not a great practitioner, that it could go by in a flash. He said, for most people, the Lamas advise or have told him that it's not an issue to be preparing to rest in Tukdam for a long period of time. And that it is, the Lamas advise that recognizing how many people really need organ donations, that he advised that to do that. But that book, I think, has about half of the book deals with preparation for these practical aspects of preparing to die in a Buddhist context or a spiritual context. Any other comments or questions?
I just wanted to comment on the medication topic. Years ago, when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was one of the first people talking about the death and dying, she really stressed a proper acknowledgement of the person's awareness during the process, and so that really advised people to advocate for a combination of medication to relieve the pain, but also to allow the person not to be, asleep or totally sedated. But that's kind of a fine art, and so one has to advocate, and so it's really, obviously advised for everyone to have an advocate and to express their wishes ahead of time. But there was, I think there are still combinations of medications that can help people relieve the pain and be conscious as well.
And I remember reading in another context that when a person who is experiencing great pain is given the choice of really their own dosage, that they were getting half the amount or something like that, that they would otherwise be given by a prescriber, or because a doctor or palliative nurse would want to err on the side of mercy, and that somebody who is saying, no, I don't need that much, and I think they were actually able to, turn the vial up or down or whatever, something like that, they were actually using much less.
One other thing, perhaps the practice of Tonglen, if we could do that.
Yeah.
I think I haven't gone through a near-death experience, but I have had times of extreme pain, and I found if I could dedicate the pain, if I could do a practice with the pain, then it diminished.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something we could guide people who don't know about these practices at the time of death to do that.
And shamatha practice during the Bardo of life can also be a great benefit, I think, to dealing with pain in terminal states. And there is research, for instance, that I've seen that combining mindfulness meditation practice for the relief of lower back pain was much more effective than drugs alone, for instance. And so perhaps our shamatha practice can also benefit us with a painful death. Anything else? So, well, thank you all for coming and staying. And I hope this has been beneficial. And next Wednesday, we will go back to a sub-Bardo of the Bardo of Living and get into the Bardo of Meditation, which I think you probably have a clear view now of why that would be important to develop stability and clarity in this life, in our meditation practice, and to also strive to rest in the nature of mind itself so that you will recognize the Mother Clear Light when she appears. So have a good week until then. Thank you.